On behalf of Namita Gokhale, William Dalrymple, and all my colleagues at Teamwork Arts, welcome back to JLF's Brave New World Season 2 and the second episode of the day. Our magazine partner for this series is The Week, Journalism with a Human Touch. Those of you who missed our earlier episode today, a portrait of an artist, Paresh Moiti and Ina Puri in conversation with Kishore Singh, you can catch this as well as all our earlier sessions on our YouTube channel, Jaipur Litfest JLF, and on our Facebook page, JLF Litfest. Our next session today is the Tribulations of Trial by Media. Kota Nilima, Paranjoy Guha Thakurta, Pushpesh Pant, and Sevanti Nainan in conversation with Indrani Bakchi. Sensational and often toxic coverage by electronic and print media interferes with due process and judicial inquiry. Accused and victim alike suffer assaults upon their right to privacy and a fair trial. In conversation with Indrani Bakchi, reputed journalists and media persons discuss the root cause of this criminal irresponsibility and the ethical and legal framework required to contain and correct this growing dangerous trend. Kota Nilima is an author, political scientist, and former journalist, and writes on poverty, gender, electoral reforms, and democratic deficit. She has authored 7 books ranging from poverty to spirituality. Her recent book, Widows of Vidarbha, Making of Shadows, is a longitudinal study of farmer suicide households. 2 of her books have been optioned for a web series, and 1 has been optioned for a movie. Paranjoy Guha Thakurta's work experience spanning over 4 decades cuts across different media, print, radio, television, documentary, cinema, and education. His main areas of interest are the working of the political economy and the media in India and the world, on which he has authored and co-authored books and directed produced documentary films. His latest book is The Real Face of Facebook in India. Pushpesh Pant is a part-time teacher, author, TV anchor, and independent producer of documentaries. He's currently teaching media and sports law at North Cap University. Sevanti Nainan was a media columnist for The Hindu, Indian Express, Mint, and currently writes for The Telegraph. She was founder-editor of the media watchdog, thehoot.org. Her books include Headlines from the Heartland and Through the Magic Window. Indrani Bakchi is diplomatic editor with the Times of India, where she's been reporting and analyzing foreign policy issues. She covers daily news on foreign affairs, as well as interpreting and analyzing global trends with an Indian perspective. Please do remember to ask questions and comment by typing it into the comment section below. And at the end of the session, Indrani will pose these questions of our speakers today. And in case any of you drop off due to bandwidth issues, you can find us on our Facebook and YouTube channels. And in case we drop off, just hang in there and we'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, the Tribulations of Trial by Media. Kota Nilima, Paranjoy Guha Thakurta, Pushpesh Pant, and Sevanti Nainan in conversation with Indrani Bakchi. Indrani, over to you.
Thank you, Sanjay. Welcome, everybody. And I think we will have a very, very interesting discussion. We have all been subject to what is called media trials, or rather trial by the media, where the media has been accused of being the judge, jury, and executioner. How much is this about free expression? How much is this about journalism? And how much is this about is it a witch hunt? Or even how much is it about the media taking on the role of the judiciary? I think to answer all of these questions, we have a fantastic panel. I don't think the answers are easy because there cannot possibly be a line between where journalism ends, media trials begin. So I think to take us through or to parse through the differences, I will begin by asking Kota, who has just done a study on an index for media trials. Kota, would you like to take us through the key takeaways from your study? Hi, Kota. Can you hear us?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Indrani. Delighted to be here on a brilliant panel to discuss something very, very important for this country, for the country's future, for democracy, media trials. I shall quickly go through our recent study by Rate the Debate. That's what we call. This was born from from something which we all have been witnessing, that the slow disintegration of the public sphere and its replacement by the space on debates, especially prime time debates on TV. Based on our research over the last 2 to 3 months, several anchors, we have been able to arrive at a media trial index, which is what I wanted to quickly go through, if I could. Next slide, please, Anubhav. Yeah. These are broadly the objectives and the overview of the research. It was not an easy research. It entailed a lot of structuralization. How do you study television media, especially with its recent trends of very polarizing, divisive narrative, and also, as you said, on the other side of the spectrum was this freedom of expression. It is, after all, the role of media to call out and to highlight where there is need for, I guess, deeper probing or transparency. However, these are roughly broadly the objectives. I've kept it very short considering the time. One of the top important things we wanted to do was methodologically create a database which could help the viewers understand what is a media trial when they see one. That's one of the, and also develop a way of evaluation of debates. The attempt right from the very beginning of this exercise, Rate the Debate, was to make it accessible to the viewers, that they can understand in a simple, easy, and non-time consuming way exactly what is a news debate doing. Next slide, please. Again, very briefly, this is the methodology. As I said, we have been studying the debates over a period of several weeks. And we were also looking at the topics, the hashtags, also the tone and the conduct of a debate. Because a lot of times there is a lot of crosstalk, intimidation of panelists who hold a particular opinion. So again, these have been all in the realm of anecdotal or narrative evidence. And we wanted to bring it in a scientific manner, in a methodologically robust manner, into a structure. So this has been one of the attempts. The quantitative analysis, broad points again. Did the anchor allocate time fairly or unfairly? Did the anchor, how did the anchor moderate the debate? Was it balanced? Was it on one side? How many times did the anchor interrupt the panelists? And what were the panelists saying when they were interrupted? What were the counter arguments of the panelists as well as the anchor when they were saying it? And the time lost in crosstalk. This is a technique which also could have gone unnoticed. The way to kind of intimidate, as I was saying, panelists holding a particular point of view, so that to the viewer it looks as if that point of view is weaker or on a weaker wicket. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. So here, this is until October 20th. We are still analyzing more debates, more anchors, more issues. We've already seen over 500 debates, over 250 hours of it. It's important, the minutes, and my team has put it in red because 15,000 minutes of debates have been analyzed. I must add here that each minute has been gone over at least 2 or 3 times to actually analyze, as I was saying, all those points which we just covered, to see if those things fall in these criteria. So every word, every minute is seen several times. Next slide, please. Just a snapshot of how our Excel sheets look like. This is from a particular period of time. Next slide, please. So this is the media trial index, which we have been able to develop until now. I think that we are, it is still developing. We are populating it with more ideas, more issues, more points as we go forward. 4 primary indicators: shaping public opinion, presumption of guilt, no fair hearing, and anchor as prosecution, judge, and executioner. Very familiar trends. Secondary indicators, how do we separate them? How do we explain each of the primary indicators? These are the ones which we can see. The last one especially is something very familiar, where the anchor dominates the debate. Especially happens when a particular point of view has to be substantiated one way or the other. Next slide, please. This is in the case of one particular debate, one particular anchor. During that period of time, as shown there, 81% of the time was spent talking about one particular case. This is at the heart of, I think, media trial, how it happens, by giving more and more airtime to a particular issue and a particular point of view. As you can see, other issues consist of just 20% or less on this particular debate. Next slide, please. So that's very briefly what I had to say and my findings. I wanted to just point out that much of this evidence is part of 2 petitions which we have put in the Supreme Court, asking and requesting the court to structuralize media trials, structuralize hate speech, and I hope that we can see some reforms in these areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Kota. That is actually that is an interesting study. My question would be that you have obviously looked at the media that we see every day in Delhi, and that is interesting because if I know anything about this sector, there is media, the role of the anchor, the role of the story, which story is used changes very much with depending on which language media we are talking about, and that entire place is a lot more granular, a lot more complex than what we get to see in Delhi. I'd like to bring in Paranjoy Guha-Thakurta here, and Paranjoy, you have written so much on media ethics, and on you've been part of the media for a long time and have written and spoken about these issues for a while. Is this a trial by media? Do you find this new, or are we looking at just the 2020 version of what we used to see in print, perhaps in the 70s, in the 80s, bit spiced by social media, spiced by or punctuated by a polarized society or polarized polity? Are all of these part of what makes a trial by media what it is today?
Thank you very much, Indrani Bakshi, also known as Horror. Thank you so much, JLF, Sanjay Roy, and everybody. You asked for it, Indrani. Okay, so it's a very good question you've asked. The first point is, trial by media is neither new nor is it unique to India. It happens across the world, and it's been going on for donkey's years. I'll just give you 2 examples to illustrate the point. The Oj Simpson trial that took place through the late 90s. I mean, it was really a trial by media, and this was the American media. I'll give you another example. I mean, I think people know about Oj Simpson. He was an African-American basketball star who was accused and then subsequently convicted for killing his ex-wife and her then partner. Okay. There was another even more interesting example concerning Madeleine McCann. You know, here was a couple who were holidaying in Portugal and their child suddenly disappeared. And there was a huge amount of speculation that the parents were responsible for killing their own child. Now, the Portuguese media went to town, and eventually the Portuguese media and some papers were fined. I mean, the same couple who sought the help of the media to trace their child eventually ended up making a huge story. So across the world and also in India, this whole issue about what is in the public interest and what is of interest to the public, this gets conflated and divided, and particularly when it comes to criminal acts. Now, I mean, the two examples before, even way before 2020, was the Arushi Talwar case and the way it was handled by the media. Now, let's look specifically at at India. Now, way back 24 years ago, the Law Commission, there was a 200th report of the Law Commission, which talked about guidelines and a balance that is required between freedom of expression and the due process, the rights of suspects and accused persons who are undergoing trial. Now, the Law Commission of India suggested various amendments to the Contempt of Court Act. Nothing has happened. This is 24 years ago. The report, the 200 report of the Law Commission, was presented in August 2006. Now, what we are seeing in India is a particularly degeneration of large sections of the media, and there are a number of reasons, and one of them is that the financial squeeze that much of the mainstream media is facing. So we have, and I want to name names over here, Republic Television, Arnab Goswami, my dear friend. The organization you happen to work for, Bennett Coleman Company Limited, Times of India, its sister channel Times Now. Look at the way they went to town on the Sushant Singh Rajput, the way the way it was depicted. Now, yes, if you have, I mean, you don't want the media to either interfere or undermine the process of trial and the administration of justice. But let me again give you another viewpoint. This balance is very thin between what is freedom of expression and contempt of court. And I must say that in recent years, just as we see large sections of those who are in positions of power and authority getting particularly intolerant and vengeful towards its critics, I see the same thing happening in the judiciary. It seems to have, its skin seems to have become rather thin. Its shoulders are no longer so broad. And I give you again an example, the example of what happened to Prashant Bhushan, advocate Prashant Bhushan, and the way the Supreme Court of India handled his case. Eventually, yes, a bench headed by Justice Arun Kumar Mishra convicted him. What did they fine him? 1 rupee. Now, once again, it throws up a huge number of issues. Now, the point is, nobody can justify inaccurate reporting. Nobody can justify contemptuous, scandalizing of the institution of the court. But the question is, when are you genuinely criticizing a judgment, or are you actually imputing motives to a particular judge? Now, a judicial order the media should be free to have what they call bona fide criticism of a court order or a judicial order. Now, last point that I want to make, unless you give me more time, the problem is the defamation laws in this country. And I myself have been a proud recipient of quite a few legal notices alleging that I have defamed some very, very important and some very, very rich people. Be that as it may, the point is, India is one of the few countries in the world where defamation is not just a civil offense, but a criminal offense. In my opinion, many of us believe that's about time defamation was decriminalized. I'm not saying take it off the statute books, but decriminalize it. One can sort of add to that. The point that I want to conclude by is that, look, the media is arguably, or let me say a large section of the media is today degenerated. And this is where we come to 2020. We see that in their desperate search for eyeballs, they're not only manipulating television rating points and television audience measurement systems, as again, we see recently what has happened, again, involving Republic Television. But we also see a large section of the media, because they've been financially squeezed on a variety of reasons. The rise of the internet, the decline or the stagnation or the deceleration in the rate of growth of advertising support. And this was happening over a period of time. But it's got accelerated, these process, after the COVID pandemic, as a result of which the traditional business models that drove media organizations have got completely disrupted. So the desperation for eyeballs, the desperation for readers, the desperation for viewers has made the media, it's literally become a race to the bottom. And part of that race to the bottom is that you really are doing everything you can. You don't care about whether a person who's been accused, a person who's in trial, gets her or his rights. Okay, I stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paranjoy. I'd like to move to Shebunti. Shebunti, you're a media analyst when media analysis was not even fashionable. And you've seen the evolution of Indian media at very close quarters. But I want to ask you a question here, which is that when you look at what we see as a trial by media, and there have been many cases, as Tak has pointed out, we are looking mainly at audiovisual, as in television media. I mean, I would make the case, and you might say this is my print bias, that I don't see this kind of sort of prosecution or by trial by media in print, in traditional media like print. And I think even in any of these latest, most recent stories or issues, I don't think print media has been. But on television, and Tak referred to the fact that they've been financially squeezed. But do you find that television media to be a news media, or is it because there is less and less reporting, ground reporting, that it becomes a kind of a studio gladiators meet? And does that influence trials, or and as a consequence, is media becoming entertainment rather than a sort of a blood sport, rather than media itself, rather than journalism? How do you see this?
Okay, so first of all, if you're comparing with print,
can you speak up, please, Shebunti, a little bit?
Okay, can you hear me? One sec. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm saying just to touch on that comparison with print. In the print media, it's not a rating system. First of all, it's ridiculous to have news television rated, because if you have ratings, you're going to have, all the things that we're seeing. It's a ratings-driven business model. Then we've just been through this whole thing of TRPs and all of that. I'll refer to interesting Zoom talk that the chief editor of Z News had last month. And he said, we are box office. There's a box office logic. He said, what do you do? It's ratings driven. There's a box office logic to what we do. And it doesn't matter whether you're ethical, not ethical. The viewer doesn't care. And the viewer today, according to him, and according to what the ratings show. Once his information and entertainment rolled into one, so you would just drive a story that you think they might be interested in. And when it relates to a murder, or it relates to an actor who's, come from as an outsider into Bollywood and all of that. So there's the whole logic of the business model, first of all. Secondly, other countries have much more effective regulation. We've kind of resisted regulation, and I'd like to say that in this particular case, the Sushant Singh Rajput case, there were two things. One is that it's not just TV, there were digital inputs coming in, and that's also the case now. Even if you have regulation, there's some manner of regulation for television. There is none for digital. And in this case, there were two things. One is there's a study that was done at the University of Michigan looking at the Twitter responses, which were tying up with these two channels and just showing that there was a political impetus coming very clearly. It studies it and it gives you at which point mental illness turns into murder and these kind of keywords come in. So there are two things here. I said there was not effective regulation. Such regulation as there is not applied. And the government particularly is very selective about when it chooses to apply it. So, all of these things are the problem. And then when we use the term media trial, yes, often it relates to a murder. Mostly it relates to a suspicious death or murder. But since this month in October, and since this particular suicide took place, the focus has been on Rajput. But last month, if you remember, it was on Sudarshan TV and this whole jihad thing.
PSC jihad.
So you have a media trial. You do have media trials against entire communities. That's another kind of media trial. And there are clear laws that the government could implement. There is a Cable TV Act. None of it has been enforced because it suits the government of the day. That is another point that comes into media trials, not everyone, but certainly into this one.
Thank you, Shivanti. May I now call upon Pushpesh to take another view of this, that if this is indeed, if media is indeed box office driven, what if at least audiovisual media, and I'm sorry to keep, it's my print bias, but if that is indeed the box office logic, should we then take that seriously? Should we take them seriously as media? Or should we then have a different designation for that? Are they then not news media then? Are they just an infotainment system? Is that another way of looking at them? Pushpesh, would you like to take a look at?
Can I dodge your question for a moment?
I don't think we can hear you, Pushpesh.
Can you hear me now?
You might want to raise the volume of your computer.
I have done it reasonably, I think. Can you still not hear me? It seems for the trial run.
Maybe you'd have to raise your
it's very faint. If you can come as close as you can to the mic.
All right, I'm as close as possible. Can you hear me now?
We can. It's very faint, but yes.
So I'll try speaking a little louder. What I wanted to say is that can I dodge your question and keep it towards the end and react to 2 or 3 things which I feel strongly about, which I have heard in this discussion. I think Paranjay used some very interesting words, like he said that the judiciary and various politicians have a thin skin and they also have narrow shoulders. I think one can add in this context of the debate 2 more things. There's the absence of spine and weak knees. And it is not only media, when we talk in terms of media, and I think you talk of your print bias and somebody else talks of infotainment.
Can I suggest that you speak a little slower so that we are able to catch you, and start with absence of spine and take it after that?
All right, absence of spine and weak knees. I think they are not only there for media people, they are also there for politicians and at the risk of contempt of court, even in the highest judicial echelons, including the Supreme Court. And I think Paranjay did a very good thing by naming names. I think the problem is that the debate is rooted in what is the root cause and what is the remedy and legal regulation. And Sevanti did cover lot of ground about regulations which are there. But it's like what Baba Ambedkar said about the Constitution. The laws are only as good as the people who implement them or who have an intention. And I think Paranjay's book on ethics raises the issue very interestingly. Is it only the media which has this crisis, or the Indian society at the moment, 2020, is not the IPL 2020, the year 2020 was also a disastrous one where there is a great decline in ethics, moral, and also the objectivity of the judiciary. Now, I had this extremely sad and surprising experience teaching media laws in a university where all the students, they wanted to talk only either about Sushant Singh Rajput case or the debate or what Kota so brilliantly brought out about the debates. So now the problem is what I found was that nobody was interested in the Article 19.1 and Article 19.2 of the Constitution, which very categorically says what is not allowed is a freedom of expression. And all the constitutional experts make it very clear that media has no special rights of expression. The media has only those rights which a citizen has, and by extension. Now, unfortunately, we also have extensions of addition of rights. So I'm not talking of 19.1, 19.2, but these exceptions about hate speech, defamation, prurience, vulgarity, hurting religious sentiments, causing enmity with a friendly country, and so on, creating law and order problem, have been there for ages since colonial times. But nobody thought that you make a comment on social media and suddenly you are hauled up for sedition, treason, waging war against the state. Now, 2 days ago, the Supreme Court came out with a very heartening judgment, but let's see how long it stays and is not overruled by a larger bench. Justice Chandrachud came out in the 2-1 majority in a judgment, Indira Banerjee dissenting, that if you post a comment in social media, it should not automatically lead to filing a FIR. Now, there are cognizable offenses in CRPC, non-cognizable offenses. Now, Paranjay made a very, very powerful case about decriminalization of defamation. I think an equally important case should be made to take off the contempt laws the way they exist in this country. Even absolute truth doesn't give you a defense. It is entirely up to the mercy against which there is no appeal. You can call for a curative petition, you can call for a review, but one judge who should have recused, the former Judge Arun Mishra, did not do so and fined a token 1 rupee, but left Prashant Bhushan with a conviction and a threat hanging on his neck that he probably could be debarred from practicing law for 3 years. Now, Arundhati had to go to Tihar jail for a day. So you can convict somebody for a rupee, convict for a sitting of the court, but the conviction is a conviction, carries the charge. So I think there are two laws. Shevanti mentioned the hate speech. Now, you have here a case where the Home Minister of the country, a junior minister in the cabinet, has patently a statement, देश के गद्दारों को, and the crowd roars, goli maro salon ko, and everybody says that this is not even in the purview of the hate speech. And you have on video, which you can't deny later, that you are quoted out of context. Then, so you come out with this was a doctoral speech, it was a doctored tape, and so on and so forth. Now, my problem with this whole issue is that in this day and age, we have an UPSC examination for civil service where we have to have a compulsory paper for ethics in the general studies before you qualify your prelims or mains. In a country where you have to teach your future civil servant compulsorily what ethics is, and then they come out of the Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy, and within 3 or 4 years, the best and the brightest are charged with everything, embezzlement, nexus with organized crime, etc. And then they are suspended, then you don't hear about that at all. I have a problem as a person, not only who's been freelancing in Hindi and English, but I have a problem as a teacher trying to teach law in my second incarnation, that the laws are there. But if you put a question to a media law student, can you name for me different legislations, acts dealing with different mediums, because media is a plural. So you have an act which deals with cinematography, an act which deals with print media, act which deals with theatrical performances, act which deals with traditional performances, street side entertainment, and it deals with broadcasting, it deals with public broadcasting, it deals with Prasar Bharati, it deals with news channels, it deals with cable, which Paranja did bring out. So I think the issue is not that the law is not there. Now, my problem is one more, if I may sound a slightly contrarian note. When I studied history long years ago, more than half a century ago, we were given in European history a case of Dreyfus, Captain Dreyfus in France, where you said Jacques. So media has a role, to my mind, legitimate role in a democracy to carry on trials. But these trials, where do you draw the line? Because if you remember another case, Paranja refreshed our memory about lots of cases, but what about Jessica Lal? Now, Jessica Lal accused were acquitted all the way till Supreme Court, due to media activity, reopened the trials and the investigation taken place. Now, what happens is we can say we are disturbed about baseless allegations made by media, but what about the absolute sabotage of a due process of law by an investigating agency, where a DGP, an additional DGP, and IGP says, oh, no rape was committed, or a minister says, I don't think this crime was committed. Now, what happens is you have police officers of various levels, from constable to DGP, who resign to contest in elections with one party or the other. How does one believe that they are not carrying on an investigation which is tainted by caste prejudice, communal prejudice? And I think Shivanti made a very interesting point. Media trial is not only about a celebrity. Media trial is about a whole lot of baseless allegations which you make. And then I think Kota has an extremely interesting methodology, but which purely as a pedantic teacher, I thought another category should have been there. Do you also see how many panelists are common to all debates and what kind of background they take to various debates? So the anchor is fine, but you handpick your panelists and you give an impression of a democratic debate by saying one from Congress, one from BJP, one independent journalist, one senior journalist, but all of us carry our biases to a panel. So fine, Arnab has reduced it to debased it to the worst possible thing, but others are not entirely free, as Paranja did. My problem is electronic media box office I can switch off. Who forces me to keep watching that? And of course, Shivanti did make that interesting point that the TRP ratings are again rigged. So like you have match fixing, you have TRP fixing. It is not that it was not applicable to print media. There was a national leadership survey, there was the ABC circulation figures, and they were contested. You are the largest selling paper in Delhi, we are the largest selling paper in Bombay, we add all our editions and we are the largest number, etc., etc. So that continues. But I'm not worried about only the problem of media trials. I'm seriously worried about the trials conducted on a media report by legitimate investigating authorities which have been subverted, not necessarily by media, but by their political masters or the ambitions of the policemen or the tax collectors. And this is when a minister in a state where law and order is a state subject comes out that, oh, this crime was not committed. I don't think there was a rape. I think they were childhood friends. Do you think that after that any policeman is going to risk his neck and job suspension, etc.? And that I think is crazy. So I'm worried about the trials in this country. I'm worried about the judiciary taking, not I should say partisan role, but you say even this judgment, which I was referring to, Justice Chandrachud, does mention a very strange thing, because the bench was, Justice Bobde says, but why should some people be targeted more extremely? If all people are equal in the eyes of law, even the CEO of the Republic TV goes to a police station and suffers the interrogation which a pauper does anywhere else. So I do feel very concerned about this, and I think I must thank the JLF and all the panelists, but I think I feel strongly not only about media trial, I'm worried about trials as such in this country. I mean, you don't know when the midnight knock would be there, and one favorable bench in Supreme Court might say, no FIR should be filed against me because I posted something on the Facebook. Another bench, and the Chief Justice is the master of the roster, may feel differently, and he say, no. This, I think, I believe that this hurts the country. So this, our uber patriotism, this tendency of the judiciary not to be custodian of the fundamental rights. Two last small things very briefly. I think there is a right also now, quasi-fundamental, which is a right to information. And the other one has been constructively read by Supreme Court as a fundamental right, is the right to privacy. So right to privacy, the right to information seem to contradict the argument against the media trial and the miscarriage of justice which has happened in this country, which would have happened otherwise without a media trial, should probably also be kept in mind.
Thank you so much, Pushpesh. I think you've just opened up a whole number of issues for us to talk about. But if I may throw open a question to the panel, which is that there are the part that we have not yet talked about is, where are the lines? I mean, when we say there is a right to privacy, yes, there is also a right to journalism, there is a right to investigative journalism, and there is a freedom of expression which applies not merely to journalists and to activists, also applies to politicians, to judges, etc. Where, as you've said, Pushpesh, one judge may rule in a certain way against a social media post, but for another judge, it is an offense. And the point is that where are these lines going to be drawn, and do we ultimately come back to the question that are we operating in too much of a laissez-faire system, or are we operating in a system where of clashing laws, of clashing processes, of clashing ethics? If I may ask Shibunti to sort of dwell on this, and then maybe Kota from your study.
Yeah.
Well, as I said, I mean, freedom of expression is fine. I think all responsible journalists know what is permissible, what is not. There is defamation. There are other laws that circumscribe it. And I think you know that. But we're in a situation where freedom of expression is very relative. I'm sorry to keep harping on this, to what the government of the day wants. So a tweet by a journalist which can offend the chief minister of UP will land the guy in jail for several months. I mean, the kind of things a channel like Republic gets away with, that is not the language of news or anchoring or anything. Yesterday, you have him saying that idiot over there, that idiot over there. I mean, nobody talks like that. So the point is that, what does the viewer want? What does the advertiser want? All of them have a responsibility. And I think, a lot of European, American, there is a regulatory framework which is enforced, but I can't also make too much of a point about that because Fox News does all kinds of things. But the point is, you have to, I mean, if it's a powerful medium, you cannot say, do you know that the district magistrates in this country are empowered by the Cable TV Network Act to stop broadcasts that are provocative, but which provocative broadcast is ever being stopped? So I don't know what the answer is. I think the answer is that a viewer has to also exercise some responsibility. And if Mr. Sudhir Chaudhary of Z says the viewer doesn't care because he wants an entertaining show, then, you have to decide how you're going to regulate that.
Exactly. And in fact, Kota, since I did call on you, if you could look at this from the point of view of your own study that you have done.
Thanks, Indrani. One of the first things which comes to my mind is a quote, I think a very popular quote by now, saying that news is a business. It's no longer about informing the viewer or any of those ideas, but it's about advertisements, it's about business. Now, I agree with Paranjay here when he says that vulnerability of the the news channels is exactly at the heart of what we are watching today. But having said that, it's not just financial. I think that vulnerability can also be manufactured, and that's something which is really worrying. That's exactly why a lot of journalists, and I'm sure all of us are aware of, journalists who have been almost forced to take positions which they do not believe in, simply because they need to keep their jobs. So that's one of the things which has to be addressed head on before even getting into regulation or the issues of the other more constitutionally important issues of freedom of expression. The other thing is that why is this now kind of an explosion of need for regulation? This interaction of the media with the people has increased 1,000 times. Now that's something somehow the regulations of this country do not address. To be very honest, the larger principles are very clear, but when it comes to the finer reforms, they are not happening simply because where the media is today, and especially when I see this when I work in villages, where how the news reaches, let's say a farmer, and how the regulations are framed is totally different. And there is a complete mismatch. In fact, that was one of the reasons why I got into this, is because this perception, which is being constantly created, does not have a structure. We are not looking at a very clear structured thing on which these regulations can be applied. That was true when there was print media, when there were journalists who followed certain ethics, because there was an outline, there was a parameter or parameters which they followed. Now, all you need to do is say a hashtag and put a question mark at the end, and you can fly, because that's exactly the kind of media we are looking at. And but that's what I'm saying, that there is a huge mismatch between how the consumer or the people are looking and accepting news and where the regulations are. This is one of the points which I wanted to make. I totally agree with Professor Pant when he says that yes, media trials are absolutely necessary. I think this is something which we have seen in many cases, that we have to have the media calling out shortfalls of judicial process and various other processes. And I also don't agree that the viewer only wants entertainment. In our own research, we have seen the Hathras case. During our period of research, we covered the Hathras case, where I think the media played a huge role, especially the electronic media. And I don't know whether it would fall in the spectrum of a media trial or not, but definitely it is not true that the viewers did not want justice. In the Hathras case, they did want justice, and it was all because of what the media did that they wanted justice. So I think it is wrong to just or very misleading and a misrepresentation of the viewer, of the Indian viewer, to say that they watch news only for entertainment. I beg to differ. My research, in fact, shows the opposite. That if the news channels, news debates are focused on issues which are close to the lives and the reality of this country, then the viewer is engaged. Now that brings me to the last point which I wanted to make. Why is it that the news debates are, as you said, Indrani, that they have become a gladiatorial matches? Why is it? Why have they turned into this blood sport, as you mentioned? That's primarily because it is also one of the reasons is because it's a diversion. And this is something which we noticed. We had maintained a clock. While a debate was going on, for instance, on SSR, what were the other issues which were happening? So that is a clear indication that when it's like a showcase, it's like a smoke screen. Now that when a debate is being watched at one go by 1 crore of people, according to those TRPs, and if this debate is not structured, if this debate doesn't allow itself to reform, and if you only say that this is noise or this is just a narrative, it won't help. We need to structuralize. That's exactly my attempt, to structuralize it end to end with every aspect into it, so that reforms are possible. This new age reforms require a new age way of looking at news and news debates.
Thank you. Poranjoy, if I may come back to you, there is a question. One is why from Veronica, which she says, why isn't media ethics a compulsory subject in media schools? And another part of the whole media trial story, or rather the debate, is one of fake news. And at which point do we, how do you spot it? B, how do you stop the spread of it? And is that one of the things that we should be looking at if it is as linked to media trials? And I'd like, in fact, Poranjoy and maybe Pushpesh afterwards to both weigh in on this.
Okay. Thank you, Indrani, for calling me by my good name, but that's very kind of you. But I'll certainly answer Veronica's question, but I want to make a few brief comments and what has been already made by the speakers. You know, I mean, there's no doubt about the fact that the government has been rather selective in applying the rules and the laws. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And what Pushpesh ji pointed out is very, very important. You have Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution of India. A fundamental right of every citizen, including every journalist, is the right to free speech. The problematic area is 19(2). Who decides what is a reasonable restriction on that right to free speech? Is it your local goon? Is it your neighbor? Is it the magistrate? Is it the cop? Or is it the Chief Justice of India? Is it the Inspector General of Police? That is the problematic area. Second point is this whole issue of regulatory anarchy. I completely go along with the view that we have complete regulatory anarchy, and this is not today, it's been going on for some time now. Let me name you the so-called regulatory bodies. You have a Press Council of India, a quasi-judicial body set up by an act of parliament, completely toothless. It cannot punish anybody. And besides, it's only confined to the print medium. Secondly, you have the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, which is supposed to be a technical and a commercial regulator. You have then the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, which is also a licensing authority. You have the Computer Emergency Response Team. And
we are almost getting to the end, so if you could quickly.
Yeah, so, you know, these are huge subjects and can be discussed at some length. But the point is, as has been pointed out, this whole issue of false equivalence. I am called frequently to channels where I'm shouted down. But why do I appear? Because I might get a word in. I tell the anchor, Navika Kumar, you call me Tukre gang member.
I need a word in it right now, because I need to get Pushpesh to take the last word, because we've got only 2 minutes to the end of the session.
No, I wish you had let Paranjoy speak, because I think he's the one who has talked about ethics and fake news and paid news more than anybody else. And I think, to answer Vedunika's question on Paranjoy's behalf, you can't teach anybody ethics through courses or textbooks. I wish well to Paranjoy's textbook, but ethics begins much earlier at home. And I think the fake news and paid news are the ones which a person has to decide. But I think about the viewer and the reader always have the choice of stop buying a newspaper. Nobody does in any case, even otherwise, or switch off the television. I think the basic issue is partisanship of the government and judiciary in implementation of laws.
Thank you, Pushpesh. I do want to continue, but I see that we've actually overshot our time, and but we are at the end of the session. And thank you all very much. I think this was a fabulous debate, and I think we could have gone on for a long, long time. May I hand you all back to Sanjay? Sanjay?
Thank you so much, Indrani Bakchi, Kota Nilima, Paranjoy Guatakurta, 79, Pushpesh Pant. Paranjoy, I hope you had the opportunity of getting your word in and you were not shouted down. This is not quite a television debate in the way that we see it. This is really about sharing of knowledge and information. And as Pushpesh said, ethics start not necessarily in the classroom, or the teaching of ethics don't necessarily start in the classroom. It has to start in the home. It is a responsibility of every citizen. Even as the conversation was going on, a visual has just been put out on social media of somebody who had tweeted something against a particular chief minister who has been bound with rope, his face covered, and is being dragged to court in Maharashtra. So there are huge challenges out there, but as you all have said, the responsibility is that of all parties. I think most importantly, can the editor-in-chiefs, can media owners sit together and create a code of conduct, create a code of ethics, which includes issues like fact-checking, includes issues of bullying, of intimidation, and of course, most importantly, the need of the hour to push back on hatred. And as Indrani said and Nilima said, this is not necessarily only about entertainment. If you give the audiences well-researched, well-documented bits of television journalism, they will accept it, and that is the need of the hour. I'm sorry that we weren't able to pose all the questions that came streaming in to you all. You're absolutely right. This is something that needs a series of conversations, not just one. We will continue to take this on at JLF Brave New World and at the Jaipur Literature Festival. But thank you all for being part of this conversation. And thank you to our wonderful audiences for watching. And again, apologies for not being able to take all your questions. Of course, we will continue this conversation. Remember to log back on to watch the next set of JLF Brave New World sessions on Wednesday 4th and Friday the 6th of November. And meanwhile, do block your dates for JLF North America and continue to watch, participate, be inspired and informed with the brilliant sessions that will be presented across our 4 editions with Nobel laureates, Man Booker, Pulitzer, Commonwealth Award-winning writers. And we kick off with JLF Colorado in November 8th to the 11th and November 15th to the 18th. We then move on to JLF Houston, November 21st to the 22nd, JLF New York, November 23rd to the 24th, and we conclude with JLF Toronto from November 27th to the 29th. Remember, this will come at the back of the election process in the United States of America and the continuing pandemic across the world. Be safe, look after yourselves, have a great weekend, and see you back on Wednesday.